Je Zhangge Gopa Nyan Lo Roi Sanje Chulan Saje Janan Lai Chanju Palu Dane Chansu Je Dake Jins Dime Zanam Jin Rola Benjir Sanjir Rola Jo Sanjir Chudan Saje Janam Gyamtso Barda Dane Gyamtso Je Dage Gyamtso Je Sunam Yola Benje Sanje Romba Jo Sanje Chudan Saje Janam Lai Janju Dane Gyamtso Je Dage Jinso Je Sunam Je Rola Sanje Romba Ro Sanjan Tamje Dewa Dam Debe Junan Demar Jute Sura Dam Dungap Je Judan Ramar Je Mebe Dewa Damba Dam Ramar Je Yering Jala Yunan Ram Donyan Jambo La Nepar George Sanjan Damje Dewa Dan Depe Judan Dempar George Dunga Dan Dunga Je Judan Ramar Mebe Dewa Damba Dan Ramar George Yering Jala Yunan Donyan Jambo La Nepa Joje Semjen Damje Dewa Dan Debe Judan Dambar Joje Dungar Dan Dungar Je Judan Ramar Joje Dungar Mebe Dewa Damba Dan Ramar Joje Yering Jal Raven Donyon Jambo La Nepa Joje Dada Zenjen Abje Lo Chizo Romer Jinja Lando So Jarada Romer Jinja Lando So Lamchuba Sawa Jinja Lando So Chumba Yeshe So Java Jinja Lando So Dada Zenjen Abje Lo Chizo Romer Jinja Lando So Chilando Robara Ginger Lando So Long Trumpa Sawa Ginger Lando So Yijeza Java Ginger Lando So Dada Zunjin Damje Lo Chizu Robara Ginger Lando So Chilando Robara Ginger Lando So Lam Trumpa Sawa Ginger Lando So Rabbi Yeshe so Java Jinja Hum are mare sara zendarem rem Good morning, everyone. Yesterday, we looked at the first two parts of the text. And the first was Guru Rinpoche's, well, aside from the setting and the request to teach, the first part of Guru Rinpoche's teaching or address was his introducing himself, so to speak, to his audience, his disciples, which, as we saw, was essentially a summary of a great deal of history, both of the Buddha and of Guru Rinpoche, and of Buddhism up to that time. And then the second part, which we looked at last night, yesterday afternoon rather, was about Samaya. And now we turn to the main body of the text, which goes through the stages, in many cases the ritual stages of the generation stage practice as performed in the Barway Dorje Dharma tradition. Before we begin, are a couple of things I should mention. In the Nyingma tradition, and this of course is a teaching and concerned with practices of the Nyingma tradition, there is great emphasis on the view, which means that the words of the liturgy and the understanding of even the most apparently physical or external ritual detail, these are always founded in the view. The view of the ground, that is to say, the nature of reality, true nature of reality, and our view of the process of coming to be familiar with that, which we call the path, and our view of the culmination of that process, full familiarity or perfect realization, which we call the fruition of Buddhahood. I mention this because much of this text, as you will see, may already have come to realize about it, is concerned with correlations between ritual and the view. The reason for this, the reason for the importance of the view in our practice, is that we think of Dharma practice, and this came up in one of the questions one of you asked yesterday afternoon. In our tradition, we think of Dharma practice as, I don't know the right word in English for this, but we could say holistic or holographic almost, in that each part of it must contain the goodness of the whole thing. If it weren't that way, then each of us would have to do every single practice and every single stage of practice. But because it is that way, that's not necessary. The Jungkook Kongtrul the Great remarked in his Beacon of the Definitive Meaning, almost all stages of the path of both Sutra and Tantra are contained in the practice of going for refuge, just by itself. So even if someone were to engage in no other formal or ritual practice than the first of the four preliminaries, the prostrations and repeating the refuge vow with the visualization and devotion, that in itself is actually a complete practice. And so it must be each and every other stage. But the only way that that works is if we are somehow able to unify the generation stage and the completion stage. If we don't unify the generation and the completion stage, if we practice them entirely separately, then we are dependent upon a very strict sequence of practices in order to progress. And that may not work. We may not be able to engage in all of those practices. On the other hand, as beginners, we may find the idea of the unification of the generation and completion stages to be somewhat daunting, because when we read about it, it sounds like something very, very grandiose. It is in its complete form, just as anything is in its perfect form. But we can begin. And the key to beginning this unification is within the grasp of each and every one of us right now. It's simply devotion. Why is this the case? In one of the Dzogchen Tantras called The Great Array of Ati, it is said, better than 100 kalpas of, or better than a kalpa of meditation on hundreds of deities is a moment's recollection of the Guru. And better than 100,000 completion stage techniques is a moment of devotion for the Guru. And I mention this because we're going to get into details. We're going to get into the nitty-gritty of ritual. And it's very easy to be put off by this because it sounds so arcane, almost impractical. At the very least, it may sound like something that is only occasionally part of our lives. We come here on the 10th and 25th days. We may come here throughout the year and attend practice intensives. And that's the only time we have all this stuff that's going to be described here, most of which goes on that mandala on my left. And it may not sound like it has much to do with our daily lives, but in fact it does. And the key is devotion. Not only for those of the Dzogchen tradition, but equally for practitioners of the Kagyu Mahamudra tradition. The key to all realization, the essence of the completion stage, the essence of what in the one tradition is called Mahamudra, and in the Nyingma tradition, most often spoken of as the great perfection, is devotion. So it's good to understand what's going to be explained in the text, but understanding is like understanding a map. It's like having I guess to give a more contemporary analogy, it's like having a GPS in your car to guide you. But the actual driving is done by devotion. So never fear that your understanding is insufficient. Never fear that your knowledge is inadequate. Because knowing all of the facts and having all of the information is only useful if it shows you how important devotion is. As Trungpa Rinpoche used to always say, the difference between the Vajrayana, including Mahamudra and Dzogchen, and the path of the sutras is it takes direct experience as the path. The path of the sutras takes inferential, valid cognition, logical reasoning as the path. But the only way we can take direct experience as the path is through devotion. And that's not hard to understand. Direct experience is what you see, hear, and feel. Well, devotion is a feeling. Understanding, information, knowledge, these are possessions of the mind. They may even be riches of your mind, but they're not a feeling. They may lead to a feeling, but it's the feeling that's important. When we valorize and prize so highly great music, we do so not simply because whoever wrote it was so clever, so smart, and whoever plays it is so good at it. We in the end, we prize it so highly because it affects how we feel. And so it is with spirituality. All right, that's enough for me. So, to continue, we're on page 40 in the middle of the page. All Guru Chitta sadhana. Sadhana, as we saw yesterday, means means of accomplishment. Chitta means mind. So how to accomplish the Guru's mind. And as with everything in Vajrayana, one word says it all. That's the point. We're trying to get the mind of the Guru. Get, not in the sense of acquire, but in the sense of, do you get it? Do you understand it? We're trying to grasp, understand, reach, connect to. All Guru Chitta sadhanas are based on the Vijayarasa Assembly Tantra from the Mahayoga of Unsurpassed Secret Mantra. Since they are therefore part of the accomplishment class, that's again the Nopika that I mentioned yesterday, they should be accomplished through all four branches of approach and accomplishment. As we saw during the weekend on the 5 chapters, each of the 8 Nopikas, or 8 sadhanas, can be summarized into usually 3 or 4 principles. So, for example, in the case of Yamantaka, it's the 3 wheels. Or sometimes they'll say the 4 wheels. In the case of Kila, it's the 4 kilas, or the 4 penetrations. In the case of the Guru, the Vidyadhara Guru, as the object of accomplishment, it is the 4 branches of approach. Approach, close approach, accomplishment, and great accomplishment. Now, I'm not going to belabor the point because Guru Rinpoche is going to go through these in great detail as we continue through the text. But to connect it to your life, if you think about the practice that we do here on the 10th day, when we get to the mantras, there are 4 of them. The approach mantra, the close approach mantra, the accomplishment mantra, and the great accomplishment mantra. And they're correlated with the various outer and inner mandalas, and also with the stages of accomplishment. I encourage you to study, not just when you're chanting it in a group, but study that long form, the form we do as a community of the Guru Rinpoche practice, because it contains a great deal. And as you learn more about it from this text, you should be able to get more and more out of its profundity. Guru Rinpoche continues, however, since individuals vary in their ability to do this, it is appropriate that Guru sadhanas be of varying lengths and complexity. Approach and close approach are practiced in reliance upon the principle alone. Accomplishment and great accomplishment are practiced in reliance upon the complete circle of deities. So, for example, to connect it with other things, when we do the subtle essence Vajrasattva practice, even within the self-generation, there are two phases. There's just Vajrasattva and Vajratopa, just the two principal deities. And then we continue by adding all of the peaceful and wrathful deities within the body mandala. And that's an example of the same principle. Sometimes you'll have it very, very spelled out. So for example, in the Sri Hiruka cycle, the approach is through the single form of the principal couple, and then a close approach is through the 9 central deities, accomplishment through the 58, all the wrathful deities, and great accomplishment through multiplying what's called that cluster or that group infinitely. This includes, he continues, means of accomplishment to which the dull and beginners can gradually become accustomed. Now understand that when Guru Rinpoche and other Buddhist masters talk about the dull or those of low faculties and so on, they're not trying to put us down. We hear that, in the West, we're very, very proud of our intelligence. We like to brag that we're stable geniuses after all, don't we? And so we find you can say anything, but people don't like being called stupid. That really gets their back up. That's not true in the cultures, in some cultures. Tibetans, for example, have much less intellectual pride. If you call them disloyal, or you accuse them of betrayal, then the knives will come out. But if you call a Tibetan stupid, they say, okay, if you say so. They don't care. That's our thing. We have this obsession with how smart we think we are. So when Guru Rinpoche says this can be practiced by the dull, he means don't be intimidated. If you're reading this, if you're listening to this, you've got it. You can get it. And that's very important, the message in general. Lama Trotop has mentioned this in teachings, and I think I've mentioned it a couple of times. If you're here, you're worthy. And this always comes up for us because the teachings constantly talk about, are you worthy? The worthy and the unworthy. Are you a person of good fortune or not? And we second guess ourselves. We think, geez, maybe I'm unworthy, It's like, because I did that thing last week, and then the other year I did this thing, and I must be unworthy. Especially if you read the more not polemic, that's the wrong word. The more fire and brimstone texts like the Beacon of Definitive Meaning or the Words of My Perfect Teacher, which lists of things that disqualify you from really having a precious human body. If you've got strong glaciers, you're out. Go to the showers. And for us, that's very intimidating. So it's important to remember, if you are hearing this, you are worthy. If you weren't worthy, ultimately all beings are worthy, of course. But relatively, you have to be in the right place in the right time. If you weren't worthy, you wouldn't even have heard these things. That's why it's said in the Dzogchen tradition that never mind practicing, never mind receiving the full teachings, any being that hears the words Dzogchen, Dzogpa Temple, great perfection, at this time, will, when the human lifespan degenerates to 10 years, will achieve the great rainbow body, the rainbow body of great transference, under the tutelage of the Dakini Srimati, who will appear in this world. Now that's before Maitreya comes. So in cosmic time, in Buddhist time, which as we saw yesterday is very, very long, that's not too long. That's even if you just hear the words Dzogchen, Dzogchen. That's how powerful this is. But the trick, of course, the secret is to hear those words. As you do, you must have already accumulated tremendous merit. So, whenever you read a text or hear a text taught that starts to make you feel like crap, remember that the overriding context in which those criticisms are valid, because we have faults and we do need to be aware of them, even though we're stable geniuses. We do have faults. The overriding context is confidence, not only in Buddha nature, but in the fact that you are worthy. And the proof is you're here. You're listening to this. You're reading this. This includes means of accomplishment to which the dull and beginners can gradually become accustomed, and cluster practice for the acute. That means elaborate group practice. Technically, cluster practice in its purest form is mostly known in the Nyingma tradition, although Marpa did it also. Cluster practice is where roles are assigned. The assembly equals the number of deities. And each person, you begin, as always, by imagining yourself as the principal. But then at a certain point, it changes, and each person adopts the identity. And in the good old days, in the Middle Ages in India and Tibet, with masks and costumes and the whole deal, makeup. They still do this in Nepal. It's very secret, but the Nepalese Vajracharyas still have this. You'll occasionally see glimpses of it in tourist things. They try to conceal it, but then occasionally a little bit gets out. Each person adopts the role of one of the deities. So if you're doing the 100 peaceful and wrathful deities, you need 100 people. And since there's more of them, since in our version there's about 126 or something, you need 126 people. That's what cluster practice is. It's where you act out the mandala. But you're the audience. It's not a performance for somebody else. It's not like those troops that go around doing Lama dances to raise money for monasteries. And cluster practice for the acute, who have amassed the resources for the external, internal, and secret accumulation of merit. All four branches are complete in these. So the practice starts with something very, very simple, maybe just one deity, and culminates, if you pursue the path of Mahayoga to its culmination, with acting up the mandala. Now we know this existed in the Sarma tradition as well, because in Marpa's songs he talks about attending a feast where Naropa became Chakrasambhara, adopted the role, and it was an assembly of 62 yoginis and yogis, disciples of Naropa, which is the number of deities in the Chakrasambhara, full Chakrasambhara mandala. If you count couples as one, it's 37. Correspond to the 37 factors of awakening. And we know that Marpa did this as well, because that's why he had the eight I was gonna use an Italian American, the sweet Italian American term for this, but I'll probably mispronounce it, so I'll just say it's 8 friends, female friends, along with his wife, because Hevadra's, his Yiram was Hevadra, and Hevadra has the central consort, the actual consort, Naramya, and then there are 8 Dakinis surrounding him, making 9 deities if you count couples as 1, or 10 if you count them as 2. And so he had them at present, actually, and when they would perform feasts, then they would sit in the appropriate positions surrounding him, and he, of course, his wife, Dagmema, which means Naramya, she was just given the name of the deity right away, was in the center with him, and he really did that. Similarly, the Buddha's disciple, King Indrabhuti, to whom he taught the Guhya Samaja Tantra, one of those rare occasions spoken of yesterday when the Buddha did teach Tantra during his lifetime, he and his court just rose into the celestial realm by enacting the Guhya Samaja mandala of 32 deities. So this is real. This has happened. And when you attend a drupja, whether it's spelled out or not, that in essence is what is happening. Sometimes it can be spelled out. If you do a full drupja liturgy, as one day we will be here. They're already translated. We just have to work our way up to it. At a certain point, each person will be cast, like on Broadway, where you get one role, you get another role, that kind of thing. And this is done. We do this. So that's the culmination of practice, the generation stage. In all this, the generation stage is of the greatest importance. I will therefore explain it by combining the generation instructions for meditating on the external, internal, secret, and very secret sadhanas. So here he's saying, we saw yesterday that our Guru Rinpoche practice combines outer, inner, secret, and very secret sadhanas that were originally, or in addition, separately practiced and that were lost during the Cultural Revolution. But the one we do contains all 4 of them. First is guidance about the preliminaries of activity. Now, the first of the preliminaries Guru Rinpoche is going to describe is one that we do, all of us do every day, whether you're doing an elaborate practice or a simple one, and that is taking refuge. Meditate on the sources of refuge in order to protect all sentient beings, yourself and others, from, and this is where we need to unpack the text, because it looks like a random list, but it's not. It's a list of degrees or levels of protection. So we could say priorities in the sense of priority when you go to the ER. So we could call it a triage list. What are you trying when you take refuge? The refuge is much the same idea as protection, right? Sharan, refuge, means to be protected from something. What are we trying to be protected from? First of all, the first priority, the immediate level, is bad rebirths. We can't necessarily protect ourselves and therefore others from bad stuff happening in this life. We can affect it beneficially through doing the right thing, through gathering accumulations, purification, so on. But we should not hold the 3 jewels responsible. Sometimes we think, hey, I'm a Buddhist. Why is bad stuff happening to me? I thought it said in the contract that if I take the vow of refuge, bad stuff's not going to happen to me. We can't live in the cartoon channel. I don't mean it in a bad way, but sometimes Western Buddhists seem to live in the cartoon channel with our expectations. You know what I mean. So what can we be protected from? Bad rebirths. Now, Barway Dorje used to make this very, very clear. Whenever he gave the vow of refuge, he used the traditional Karma Kajut text for doing so. And when describing the benefit of taking refuge, it would say, the principal or immediate benefit of taking refuge is to become free from fear. And then it quotes, I guess, the Vinaya or one of the Buddha's teachings, saying those who take refuge in the three jewels become fearless. And then it explains it. Free from fear of what? Fear of bad rebirth. So the first thing we triage, the first thing we prioritize is to free ourselves and, in our aspirations, others from bad rebirth. That's the first thing. But that's not enough. That's the first priority. That's the emergency level. But bad rebirths are not the whole problem. Because if we're born as a deva or human and do bad things, then we're still going to have bad rebirths later, and we're still going to suffer. So the second priority is the 6 states of suffering in samsara. What are the 6 states of suffering? Well, we know what the 6 states are. You know, the hell realms, pretas, animals, humans, asuras, and devas. But they each have their own particular type of suffering. So there are 6 types of suffering. For example, although we can in general say all samsaric beings suffer from birth, aging, sickness, and death, these are particularly sources of suffering to human beings. Because in addition to undergoing the process of coming into physical being, and the process of decay, which we call maturing and aging and so on, we get neurotic about it. Animals probably dislike the frailty that they experience as they age, but they probably don't dwell on it the same way that we do. We're obsessed with it. It's ironic that the more denial of impermanence we manufacture in our culture, the more neurotic we become about aging. You would think that it would be the opposite, that our attempts to deny impermanence would somehow, at least temporarily, free us from our neurotic obsession with our diminishing faculties. But they don't. They do the opposite. We become more and more and more obsessed with it. Now we even have aging actresses making movies about being aging actresses. I was reading this morning in the New York Times bulletin that, a prominent aging American actress my age, that's aging. When you're in your 60s, you're really aging. It's going to get worse, but it's bad. And making a movie about a prominent actress, aging. And of course, the film is addressing denial, right? And discrimination against aging actresses in the film industry. But the fact that we make this film, and I'm not criticizing the film, I'm sure it's a wonderful film, but is a tribute to our neurosis. That we're making movies about making movies about our denial. We've so embraced denial that we actually celebrate it. We think it's entertaining. We're going to go to the movie theater and eat popcorn while watching an aging actress portray a fictional aging actress. Maybe the fictional aging actress is portraying in her latest movie another fictional aging actress. Maybe it's like having two mirrors opposite one another. So, when the Buddha says things are getting worse, and we say, no, they're not. We have this and that and the other thing. We have automobiles and the internet and cell phones and so on. It's much better than it used to be. We're actually getting more and more neurotic. Well, I can't speak for you. I know I am. And the pace is accelerating because it builds on itself exponentially. So that's human suffering, and then the other realms are all worse. The Asura realm sounds okay, except that they're constantly fighting and they die in horrible ways. And the Deva realm sounds good, except that the downfall of a god is supposed to be worse than the suffering in hell realm. So the second thing we want to free ourselves and others from is the suffering of samsara as a whole. And the third thing is the causes of suffering, which are within our being, within our continuum. So now we've moved on to page 41. So what are the causes of suffering? Are kleshas, and their root, ignorance and self-fixation. So if we take the long view, when we take refuge, we are taking refuge from ignorance. We are seeking protection from our ignorance, our self-fixation, which cause our kleshas, which cause us to accumulate karma, which causes us to suffer. Now, I mentioned, I quoted Jomo Kongtrul the Great a few minutes ago as saying that the practice of taking refuge just by itself contains the entire path. If that is true, if it contains both the path of Sutra and Tantra, then how is that so? Because we think of taking refuge as I, so-and-so, take refuge in the Buddha, who appeared in this world and taught, the Dharma that he taught, and the Sangha, which consists of those who teach and present his teaching. Well, those are, according to Guru Rinpoche, the external sources of refuge. The external sources of refuge are the three jewels. Now we have to start with these and continue with them. We never get beyond them unless you achieve Buddhahood, and then you become the Buddha, you become the Dharma, and you lead the Sangha. But there is an internal aspect to these as well. And that is what we call the internal sources of refuge, or the three roots. And the internal sources of refuge are very important for us as practitioners of Vajrayana, and especially in this context of the generation stage. The first is the root of blessings. And that's your guru, the root and lineage guru, so your personal teacher and the lineage from which they come. Because your guru has inherited a genuine lineage, going back to the Buddha, and as we saw yesterday, Vajradhara, Samantabhadra, These are the Buddha's Sambhogakaya and Dharmakaya. So we're talking about the Buddha. Starts with the Buddha. Because the Guru has inherited the lineage of the Buddha and can therefore do everything the Buddha could do for us, the Guru is the Buddha in our life. We don't need to, I learned a new word yesterday, fear of missing out, FOMO. We don't need to feel FOMO because we didn't meet Buddha Shakyamuni, because we met the Guru. Even if Buddha Shakyamuni were to walk into this room, I mean, it would be pretty impressive. We definitely, well, for one thing, we'd get on our phones and tell Lama Prabhupada to get here fast. But, I mean, it would be a big deal. But there's nothing the Buddha could say to us, and it's only through teaching that Buddhas liberate us, as the Buddha himself said, that Barway Dorje or the Jawan Karmapa couldn't say to us. Because the teachings that they give come from the Buddha and are accurately passed down. That's what the point of a lineage is: accuracy, freedom from distortion. Did anyone play broken telephone when they were kids? You say something to somebody else and they repeat it to the next person. You go around in a circle and you see how different it comes back to you at the end. Well, that's not a good lineage. Our lineage is not like that. So therefore, the Guru, the root of blessings, is our source for the Buddha. That's where we get the Buddha's wisdom. And the Guru is sufficient. Nothing is left out. Nothing is missing. It would be lovely to see the Buddha in person, but we've heard from our teachers, and we'll continue to hear from our teachers what the Buddha would say to us. So the Guru really is the Buddha. The second of the three roots, the internal refuge, is the Yidam. Now, Yidam is a very interesting word. It's a translation, apparently, of the Sanskrit word Ishta Devata, which kind of means the deity you chose, or some Tibetans have also translated it as Vipinpa, the deity you want, the deity you. But the Tibetans translated it stipulatively as Yidam, which means a mental bond. Now, we talked about the nature of Samaya as a bond. The Yidam is, as we saw yesterday, the substance of the bond between you and your Guru. It's how you relate to the Guru. It's the force that passes between the Guru and you back and forth. The Yidam's form, the Yidam's mantra, the Yidam's bodhicitta. So what is it we're trying to get from the Guru ultimately? Well, we saw that the Guru is the source through their lineage of the Buddha's wisdom and teaching. So what we want from the Guru is Dhamma. The Yidam is how we internalize Dhamma. That's why the Yidam is the source of siddhi, or attainment. Attainment doesn't just mean magical powers. It means actually accomplishing Dhamma, actually changing. So Yidams are Dhamma. And we may say, well, no, wait a second. Dharma is written words. Well, as we say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. The image of the deity, the form of the deity, the meaning of the deity's form, these embody Dharma. And therefore, when we bind ourselves to that deity in practice, when we identify with that deity, we are internalizing Dharma. That is why the yidam, the root of attainment, is the internal refuge of Dharma. And then we have Sangha. Now there's a lot of talk nowadays about who's Sangha and who isn't. The Karma Kajupa to which we belong have become very, very conservative, not here, but in India and elsewhere. And we'll say, for example, that I'm not Sangha because I'm not a monk, which is fine, I admit that. Sangha means assembly, and Tibetans added the word ge, virtuous. So Gendun, virtuous council, virtuous assembly. Sometimes they'll gloss it as those devoted to virtue, changing Dunma into Dunpa. But anyway, so we use the word Sangha in many Buddhist countries, like especially in Southeast Asia and so on, and to mean monastics. But in the Mahayana point of view, the Sangha as a source of refuge is not particularly, forget about lay people like me, but it's not particularly even just monastics, it's actual bodhisattvas, like Chenrezig, Manjushri, and Tara. They are the true Mahayana Sangha. So when we get to the Vajrayana, the principal Sangha consists of viras and dakinis. Or we say, because we're closet feminists, and I say closet because this Dharma was transmitted through incredibly patriarchal, misogynistic societies. So we must be somewhat closeted, but because we do have the feminism of Vajrayana still in our blood, the dakini. There are also dakas, the male, but where principally of the greatest importance is the dakini. The dakini is the root of activity. Now, as Kondo Rinpoche remarked when teaching here, in the lineages that emphasize monasticism, they try to avoid talking about the dakini and let's say the Dhammapala is the root of activity. And that's okay too, especially in our case because the principal Dhammapala, Ekajati, is a dakini. So it's, fine, either way, whatever you want to say. But what does that mean? And in what way is that internal? From the point of view of the common vehicle, the Sangha consists of two of the four types of the Buddha's followers, male and female monastics. The Buddha has four types of followers, male and female monastics and male and female lay disciples. Those are called the four types of followers, Jisuju. And of those, conservatives would generally say, well, only the monastics are Sangha. And that's fine. We're talking about the common vehicle, and there are times where the common vehicle is of the greatest importance. That's fine. We can say that. But in the Mahayana, we're talking, about Arya Sangha. And Arya, noble Sangha, does not mean monastics. It means bodhisattvas, those who've achieved the Arya or noble states, first Bhumi upper. People sometimes use the term noble Sangha to mean monastics. There is a word for monastics, it's noble, Sunma. That's not the same as Pakpa or Arya. Anyway, in the Vajrayana, the Sangha, like the Buddha and Dharma, however, must be internal. The Dakini, as the source of activity, is the channels. within your Vajra body. By definition, internal. The Viras, the Dakini's consorts, are the essences moving within those channels. And the energy or wind which moves them is their union. It's neither the one nor the other, it's the union of the two. Now, don't jump to conclusions about which aspect of your anatomy this is and which it isn't, because it's all of them. Yes, it is neurotransmitters. When we talk about the Bindu, yes, they include neurotransmitters, but not only. Yes, it is sexual fluids, but not only. Yes, it is DNA, but not only. It's all of these and not only one of them. The point is, from a Vajrayana point of view, our bodies are containers of something like circuitry. Our bodies are structures or bags that contain channels of all kinds. We know this. You cut a person open, you see veins and arteries and nerves, and all of these things are channels. The channels contain all the things that keep us alive and that enable us to think. And they move around. So that's what we call wind or energy. And the stuff within those channels, your blood, your neurotransmitters, all of your bodily fluids, all of those things, especially those things that are most closely connected to states of mind, are Bindu, or essence. So, as Vajrayana practitioners, we take refuge in our own body as the assembly of the Sangha. And we call that the Dakini, or Dakinis, the roots of activity. So that's why this is internal, the second sources of revenue. And those are principally, they're of course, they're connected with the completion stage, but beginning with the generation stage. Then, beyond that, we have the secret sources of refuge. The secret sources of refuge are the principal sources of refuge in the completion stage of the path of liberation. Path of means we're primarily concerned with, or to a great extent concerned with, the channels, energy, and essence. And we're concerned with that on the path of liberation too, but less so. We pay less overt attention to it. The secret sources of refuge are the Trikaya, the three bodies, the Buddha. Now this does not contradict our notion of taking refuge in the three jewels, because as Gampopa points out in the Jewel Ornament of Liberation, the ultimate, the Dharma, is the Dhammakaya. The Buddha alone is the source of refuge, ultimately, because he is the destination of the Sangha. The Sangha, in either the liberal definition, conservative definition, Mahayana definition, or Vajrayana definition, one thing we can say, we can all agree upon, the Sangha consists of those who want to become Buddha. That's what we all want. And so the destination of the Sangha, the point of the Sangha, is Buddha. So therefore, the ultimate source of refuge is Buddha. So in a sense, you could say that the external sources of refuge are the three jewels outside you. The Buddha as an historical person who started a lineage, the Dharma he taught, and the Sangha he created, which has passed down through time. And the internal sources of refuge are those three as present within your life internally. The Guru is present within you as the Buddha is present within you as your Guru, who lives in your mind. The Guru, of course, if they're still alive, they live somewhere. But the real Guru is what they have done to your mind. That's within your mind. The Dharma is the yidam, which is the actual means or process of transformation. And we saw that the Sangha is the dakinis. But ultimately, or secretly at least, because we're not at ultimate yet, Rinpoche's going to get on to ultimate. It's all about the Buddha. I mean, to be blunt, that's why we call this Buddhism. It's all about the Buddha. You know, in Chinese, they don't call what we practice Buddhism. They don't call it Bofa or whatever it is. They call it Lamaism. And that became popular in the West. And some lamas have actually said that's okay because we do emphasize the Guru, the Lama, and so on. But still, it's meant somewhat, if I may say so, pejoratively. We're Buddhist. We may be Lamaist or not Lamaist, that's up to you. But we're Buddhist for sure, if we've taken refuge. And so ultimately, we're taking refuge in the Buddha. But how is the Buddha present in our secret life, in our innermost secret essence? The Buddha is who we really are. So therefore, Guru Rinpoche says, the secret sources of refuge are the natural three bodies. To put it in conceptual terms, and don't mistake the conceptual terms for the reality, but if you look at your mind, you won't find anything. You can't find anything. If you find something, you found something else, but not your mind. You can't find it. That ineffability of the mind, the fact that it can't be captured through conceptual apprehension, that no idea we can have about the mind can possibly be accurate, including what I'm saying now. That's not and that's why we say the Dhammakaya is our mind's nature. But your mind is not nothing, right? I mean, you look at your mind, you can't find anything, but yet you can look at your mind. And the mind that's looking and not finding itself is the same mind that's not being found. So what's that about? Well, your mind is not nothing either. It's not something in the sense that it's ineffable, but it's not nothing. That's the Sambhogakaya. That's the real Sambhogakaya. And your mind actually is, in and of itself, not limited by anything. The limitations we experience in our minds are caused by our bodies. So, for example, I can't see what's beyond those trees out there, and in fact, I can only see what I can see through the window. But that's my body's problem. That's not my mind's problem. That's a physical limitation of my body. Even the notion of the senses we have, we know that other species on this planet have different senses in some cases. Sharks have a sense we don't And we know there are species that don't have all the senses we have. So even our notion of what constitutes the construction of reality is a physical. The limitations on that are physical, not mental. So your mind is not only not something, not only not nothing, but it's also not limited. It's less dangerous to say what the mind is not. It's more dangerous to try to say what the mind is, because then it creates more reification. But your mind is not something, that's the Dharmakaya, simply put. It's not nothing, that's the Sambhogakaya. And it's not limited, that's the Nirmanakaya. So the three kayas of Buddhahood are already present as within you, as what you are. In fact, that's all you really are. Everything else is just rust or sediment. So we don't actually attain the three bodies as the result of the path. If we did, they'd be temporary. Because anything you can attain, you can lose, right? If you can find it, you can lose it. It has to have always been there. If it hasn't always been there, and that's what we mean, we use this grandiose English translation, spontaneous presence. It means always there. It was always there. It's just there. It sounds so highfalutin in English, it's already there. So the three bodies or three kayas are already there within us. And the result is simply to come to know that. And as we saw yesterday, there's basically three states, right? There's not believing it but not knowing it, and then there's knowing it. So Buddha is someone who knows it. A practitioner with confidence is someone who believes it but doesn't yet know it. And most of us are just people who don't even believe it. Most people don't believe it. Well, I won't say that again. So those are the secret sources of refuge. The very secret I guess it's like the government, right? You've got secret, top secret, most secret, all these different levels. The very secret source of refuge is the single, and I said drop in those days. I'm still using drop for Tigli, which is a literal translation, but it's not very helpful. Nor would be one Buddhist scholar posited the translation isotropic hypersphere as a translation of Tigli. He was a student of the guy who translated Gyamtso or Bodhi as limpid clarity and consummate perspicacity. This was a fellow who felt that Heidegger and Dzogchen agreed about the nature of reality. He was these were wonderful people. They are wonderful people. Well, one of them, the elder, passed away. And we owe them a great deal. We stand on their shoulders, don't forget, just as much as, and whoever designs the latest Apple product is standing on what was the name of that man they murdered in England? The great computer, he invented computers and they sterilized him chemically and then he killed himself. Turing, Alan Turing, yeah. So all computer scientists, as glorious as we may think we are, well, I'm not one, so I'm not glorious. I'm really not a computer scientist, that's become clear to me lately. Stand on Alan Turing's shoulders. Without Alan Turing, there wouldn't be, iPhones. So in the same way, we shouldn't disparage the limpid clarity and consummate perspicacity, which are attributes, after all, of an isotropic hypersphere. But drop isn't great either. So So usually I say essence, but it's this word that in Tibetan, tigle, that translates two different words in Sanskrit. One is tilaka, which can simply mean a dot, and one is bindu. Now, it gets really complicated in modern Indic languages because the two are used interchangeably. So, for example, the red dot that some people wear can be called a bindi or a tila. And so there isn't an absolute dividing line between tilaka and bindu. But typically, in Tantra, where you're talking about chemicals like neurotransmitters, sexual fluids, DNA, it would be called bindu, which will often translate as essence. And when you're talking about empty forms, then it would be spoken of as tilaka. So, for example, the halos that religions depict their figures as having, those are tilaka. That's why, that's why they're halos. Sorry, I guess that's a secret. But anyway, well, Dante has a magnificent bit in, I guess, the end of the whole cycle where God is seen as three tilakas. There was a disciple of Barway Dorje who passed away many years ago, and he had an edition. He had an edition of Dante that had the most magnificent Gustave Doré illustrations. And because I used to stay with Will and Laura in Albany when I used to go up there with Rinpoche, and I would stay in the library, which is always a teacher's place to put me. So I was into the books, his incredibly interesting books on the role of compassion in Lutheran theology by Reinhold Niebuhr and things like that. And but also this Gustave Doré, I can only call it illuminated Dante, and it showed this. It was quite something. So the very secret source of refuge, to get back to the text, is the single tilaka of awareness within your mind. And why is that very secret, and how is it different from the foregoing, from the three? Well, the three are not three. It's basically the three are one thing. Your mind's ineffability, its non-nothingness, or its lucidity, and its being unlimited are conceptual isolates. We can isolate the concepts, but they are concepts about the same thing. I mean, it's just one mind, right? So we can say the fact that it's not something is one fact. The fact that it's not nothing is another fact. And the fact that it's not limited is a third fact. We could say that more or less if we want to. But the thing about which those facts are true does not have parts. It's elementary in the sense of an elementary particle. It cannot be divided. That we call the single tilaka of awareness. And now, on the one hand, this is the most highfalutin thing in all Buddhism, but on another hand, it's actually quite ordinary. What makes your mind a mind? You're aware. That's it. So what are these three facts about? Awareness is not something. Awareness is not nothing. Awareness is not limited. It's very simple. But knowing believing that and knowing it are two different things. Sorry, I said three different things by mistake. I'm getting mixed up. So, before we move on, to summarize the sources of refuge, externally, we take refuge in the Buddha. I mean, past and future Buddhas and so on, but we don't even know who they were. We can't even remember their names. There's so many of them, and then this one is the same as that one, sometimes and not at other times. It's very confusing. So I just generally, when I think of the Buddha, I think of Buddha Shakyamuni, who lived in India 2006, 700 years ago. We keep on making it farther away because archaeology keeps. What happened was people didn't believe how long some of the early hierarchs like Ananda and Kashyapa lived. So they said, they didn't live that long. So they kept on moving the Buddha's dates forward. But now we have archaeology that can actually do carbon dating and all kinds of stuff. And we know that they really did live that long. And there's also a NASA proof, because there's a description of a star conjunction or astronomical events visible at the time of the Buddha's awakening. And NASA has a program that you can access that shows the sky at any given moment in human history. But before you ask, I haven't actually done the footwork of looking at this, but it's there. You go to NASA, you find it. And that corresponds to an earlier date than Westerners used to think. So it was probably between 26 and 2700 years ago. Oh, and the other thing was we found that monastery was it in Afghanistan or somewhere? There was clearly a Buddhist monastery because it had statues of the Buddha, and it was older than people thought the Buddha was. So anyway, so we have the historical Buddha, and we have what he taught, and we have the lineage from him. And then internally in our lives, in the present day, we have the Guru who lives in our mind, the Yidam, which the Guru gave us, which is our Dharma, what transforms us, and the Viras and Dakinis within our bodies. And then secretly, privately, within our minds, we have who and what we really are, which is the Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Nirmanakaya. And very secretly is there to remind us that they're not three different things. It is awareness that is not nothing, not something. It is awareness that is not nothing, and it is awareness that is not inherently limited. So those are the first two things about refuge. The goals of taking refuge are to protect yourself and others from bad rebirths, from samsara, or from suffering in general, and from the causes of suffering. Those are three goals. And the sources of refuge are the outer, inner, secret, and very secret. Now we have the motivation or the affect. We could say the motivation is the goal, so maybe affect or feeling of taking refuge. And Guru Rinpoche describes this. Again, outer, inner, secret, and very secret. And the point of this is it's wide open. Barway Dorje used to say this again and again and again. And I think his saying this alone probably has saved my life. Literally. I think I might have killed myself by now, honestly, given some of what I've experienced in terms of depression, had I not heard Barway Dorje say this. And what he said was, and those of you who knew him will remember this, the path is not narrow. It is wide open. The Mahayana is not about restriction. It is about openness. Now, he used to say this again and again when he was teaching the jewel ornament, when he was teaching the 7 points of mind training, when he was teaching the Bodhicharyavatara back in the old days. He would say this again and again every time rules and regulations came up, or narrow definitions. He said, don't mistake this to be about restriction. He said, restriction is the problem, not the solution. He said, you cannot free yourself, was another way he put it, by wrapping yourself up tighter. Our problem is that we have bound ourselves up with the thread of our own thinking. We're not going to undo that thread by finding extra thread and adding it to that. They said that is not the role of Dharma. The role of Dharma is to undo the thread we already have. So the concepts and ideas of Dharma are remedial. They're not additional. They remedy and they go against and undo the concepts and ideas of samsara. So, although when Guru Rinpoche is saying the outer this and the inner that and the secret this and the very secret this, it sounds like he's just giving you a list of things you can barely understand, let alone remember. That's the opposite of what he's doing here. What Guru Rinpoche is doing here is saying, this is not a procrastinating bed. This is not you're not being forced into a vice here. This is not off the rack. It's bespoke. In other words, Dharma is not a suit that you buy. It's one size fits all. It is was intended by the Buddha from the very beginning to be adaptable to each person's interests and capacities at that time. Ultimately, we all have the same capacities. Ultimately, we're all basically the trikaya, the three bodies, with some garbage wrapped around it. The only thing that makes us different is our obscurations. Ultimately, we're all perfect. So, whatever we think makes us worse or better than anybody else is just temporary. So we shouldn't really let ourselves be too attached to it. So therefore, it's not that you need to practice outer, inner, secret, and very secret refuge every day. It's that you can look at it in different ways, and they're not contradictory. So therefore, there are 4 different affects or feelings that can come with taking refuge that Guru Rinpoche describes here. I'm sure there are more, but he gives 4 examples. And that's important because remember we saw that the feeling of devotion is the only way we as people can unite generation and completion. We can't do it with ideas. If we attempt to unite the generation and completion stages with ideas, that's like expecting our GPS to drive our car for us. Maybe that works with the car that schmuck, I'm sorry, that person designed that doesn't need drivers. What's his name? His name sounds like schmuck. It's not. Oh, no, it's Musk. Oh, like musk deer. Yeah. Sorry, I don't mean to be political. Well, I slept a bit. Yeah. So, bless his heart. So, what are the emotions that go with taking refuge? We know what the goals are, or we've been told what the goals are, what the sources of refuge are. What is the emotion? Guru Rinpoche says Going for refuge out of fear of the suffering of samsara is external refuge. And there are times where that's appropriate for us. It's not like you have to do the external one and then you graduate from that and then to the internal one and so on. You can go back and forth. You're allowed to take refuge in the Buddha even when you're practicing Vajrayana. In fact, you're supposed to. And you're allowed to take refuge in the Guru. When you think of the Guru, that's more important than making yourself think about the Buddha. Because you didn't meet the Buddha. Well, maybe you did, but I didn't. But you met the Guru. So sometimes it's fear. And that's okay. What Guru Rinpoche is saying here is it's okay to be afraid. Sometimes we take refuge or go for refuge out of fear of the suffering of samsara. For ourselves and for others. Knowing that samsara does not exist as such is internal refuge. When someone has profound meditation experience, they will temporarily experience, or they may, they're all different types. They may temporarily experience the fact that samsara doesn't exist as such. That samsara is just a concept we apply to what we want to get away from, running in circles. And nirvana, or the transcendence of misery, is just a concept we apply to where we want to get to, the state we want to achieve. So at times, as you practice, you may experience that. But that doesn't mean you stop taking refuge. But you take refuge at that moment in a different way. That's called internal refuge. Now you're not thereafter committed to that. When the experience vanishes, as it will, then you'll be afraid again at some point. That's okay. That's fine. Bringing kleshas to the path as wisdom is secret refuge. Now, what does that mean? It's important that we talk about what it doesn't mean. We have a great deal of trouble with this, and Vajrayana has a bad reputation because we get this wrong a lot. We get it wrong sometimes out of naivety, which is understandable. And we get it wrong sometimes because we game the system. We try to use Vajrayana as an excuse for bad behavior. But it does mean something. The easiest way to explain this, theoretically, of course, Lama Trato will explain it in detail during the Shepkar teaching on Dzogchen. But basically, the simplest way to look at it, to understand what it means on a conceptual level, is that if let's say you're angry. I don't know I don't know why, but for the last few months, I've been struggling with an unprecedented level of anger. I just get angry at everything. And I noticed a couple of things. One thing is that it's not what I'm angry at that's making me angry. Of course, reading too much news early in the day before you've had coffee is probably not a really good idea for me, but it's not really what's going on that is making me angry. Because at other times when I'm not just supposed to be angry, I can read the same news and then I just feel empathy. So one thing I've discovered about anger is that, and this may be true for everyone, but I don't want to make a blanket statement based on the sample of one disordered mind. But all my anger is anger at myself. all my anger, I can't say if this is true for other people or not, but when I look at it, what am I really angry at? I'm angry at myself. Not in a deeply thought way, like I'm disappointed that I made these mistakes in my life and I wish to scold myself, but more like on the level of irritation because I can't do something better. You know, when I get frustrated with technology that I can't make work for me, I'm not angry at the people that made the technology. I'm not angry at the inanimate object that I can't get to do what I wanted to do. I'm angry that I can't do it. Whether there's a defect in the device or not is irrelevant. My anger is not at the device. My anger is at me. And that's why I won't let go. That's why the other day I spent 3 hours pursuing remedies for a minor technological inability on my part. And I wouldn't let it go. And that inability to let it go was the motivation. I was angry at myself. So how is there wisdom in that? How do we take the klesha of anger as wisdom? If you actually can, and it's not always possible, well, for me, it may always be possible for you. When you feel anger, the anger that we feel turns us away from ourselves. It's almost like somebody's grabbing your head and turning it from one direction to another. If you don't let that happen, and you do have the choice because it's you doing it, there's nobody else doing that. If you don't let that happen, try looking at the anger. Don't try to make it highfalutin, like looking at the nature of the anger or looking to see if the anger exists or not. Those are just ideas, concepts. The nature of a thing is a concept about the thing, after all. But instead of looking at the object of the anger, whether you believe it's an external hard drive or you, the schmuck who can't get an external hard drive that everybody else can make work to work, you're still looking at the object. So look at the anger itself. All it is clarity. All anger is, all it ever is, really, is heightened lucidity. Your mind's, your mind has this capacity to know, right? To be lucid. You could say heightened energy of the mind if you want to. Not exactly insight, but energy. That's all anger really is. The problem we have is that we fool ourselves with our anger. Instead of looking at the anger, we look at what we're angry at, or worse, at what we think we're angry at. So looking at the news is not transforming anger into wisdom. Looking at myself, at whom I'm actually angry, is not transforming anger into wisdom. But if I let myself, if I'm willing to look at the anger itself, it's inherently wisdom in the sense that it's nothing else. There isn't anything else there. It's just your mind, your good old ordinary mind, being energetic. And it's the same thing with the other kleshas. Why do we get jealous? Jealousy is a very strange emotion because it's so painful. I've experienced jealousy. I experience it, in all sorts of different contexts, and Of the five kleshas, it's the one that I hate the most, which is another problem. But what is it really? If you look at the feeling of jealousy itself, it's actually, you want to get something done. It's actually all about getting stuff done. That's all it is. It's very funny. And pride, pride is comparative, right? Ngajal in Tibetan. Me king. That's the word for pride in Tibetan. Ngajal, or me win. Me win. Me king. I like me king because it sounds like something a very proud person might say. Me king. You peasant. Me king. Well, what makes us feel me king? When we compare ourselves to someone else. Pride as a klesha is always comparative. So it has to be. It's dualistic. But why is it? What is the pain? Because the feeling is painful. It's not pleasant. Pleasant pride is not a klesha. Like the sense of I did the right thing. That's not a klesha. That's rejoicing in your own goodness, which is healthy. The klesha of pride is painful. Why is it painful? Because you know it's a lie. You're not king. Everybody king. When you look at pride itself, it's your mind trying to disguise the fact that everybody is equal. That's why we say pride is the wisdom of equality. And desire, wanting. When you want something, I want my lunch. I want a drink. I want to have sex. I want more respect. I want money. I want that damn place to work. Whatever it is, it's all wanting, right? It's all the same. What is wanting? What makes us want? Look, if instead of looking at what you think you want, which doesn't help, because if you get it, then you want something else, right? Well, at least I do always. You get one thing, then you want the next thing. But what makes us want? It's that we discern excellence. That's why it's called the wisdom of discernment. The mistake is that we link excellence with acquisition. You can see a magnificent painting without having to buy it and still enjoy the fact that it exists. You can hear a magnificent opera or symphony or song on the radio without having to immediately buy it on Amazon or whatever we now buy stuff, because I don't buy music, so that anyway. It's the mistake we make is in acquisitiveness. I don't smoke marijuana, and this is not a moral position. I don't actually believe that there's any moral issue surrounding marijuana, but I love the smell. I love that smell, and I love the fact that now that it's legal, I can smell it a lot when I'm walking through the streets of Poughkeepsie or New York City, or not so much right now because it's pretty square here, but sometimes. And I love the smell because to me it's the smell of freedom. I don't want to smoke it. And I've had all kinds of substance issues. But for some reason, it's just not, I just don't get addicted to that. But I like the fact that it's there. I like the fact that other people can enjoy it. And I actually get pleasure, real pleasure from that smell. I like the smell. The same way I like the smell of incense and really good perfume. Or cologne. Not bad perfume, not like drugstore perfume. Or Axe body spray or whatever this crap that people wear. But, like really, the real thing. And I don't need to run out and buy them, but I like that they're there. And so what is it, that feeling of liking something? It's the discernment of excellence. It's like when we see beautiful flowers or the beautiful blue sky. We don't try to buy the sky. Well, I can think of a couple of people who are probably going to try to buy the sky at some point during their lifetime. Right? That's the next step. Without mentioning any names, let's not mention any names, but there are guys there who want to, guys specifically, I won't say people, guys who want to buy this guy. Anyway, so what is desire? Fundamentally, it's appreciation of excellence. Appreciation. So the difference between the wisdom and the klesha is between appreciation and appropriation. Anyway, so that's bringing kleshas to the path as wisdom is secret refuge. Because when you do that, when you see the goodness of even the difficult things with your mind, which we can't always do. I mean, I'm talking a great game here, but I'm not necessarily a great player. But when we do that, we are taking refuge in the goodness of our own mind. Secret doesn't mean shush. Secret here means private, internal, personal to you. Nobody else could know it because it's happening within your mind. And finally, the equal perfection of samsara and nirvana in their illusory primordial liberation is very secret refuge. That's kind of highfalutin, but I'll try to unpack it. Equal perfection. Well, obviously, perfection must be equal. I mean, you can't be more perfect. We do use that, a more perfect union and so on, in our constitution or somewhere. Perfect is supposed to be a superlative and not a comparative. So, but I guess you could be perfect and perfecter and most perfect and whatever. But the equal perfection of samsara and nirvana, what Guru Rinpoche, so the equal perfection is kind of a clumsy translation on my part. It's the equality and perfection. That samsara and nirvana are equal and perfect. We could see, because he uses Gyamtso, which Tibetan does have verbs and nouns and adjectives and adverbs, but the distinctions between them are not as rigid as with English. So you can, and I think you see this in some European languages where verbs can become nouns and nouns can be used as verbs and so on. And we're doing this now a little bit in English, like access used to be a noun, and now it's also a verb. You used to have to gain access to something. Now you just have to access it. Well, at least it's shorter, so okay. A lot of other things are getting longer. You used to switch something, now you have to switch it out. You used to just change a light bulb. You didn't have to change it out. Now you have to switch it out. Switch out that light bulb. I don't like it when language becomes more cumbersome. So the realizing that the identity or the equality of samsara and nirvana, as it says in lineage prayer, is the very secret or ultimate refuge. Illusory primordial liberation. It would be probably better to say primordial freedom, because liberation implies that there was at some point a state of bondage. If there ever was a state of bondage, then samsara and nirvana are real, right? So illusory means that there is the appearance of attaining freedom. In other words, the Buddha appears to be very different from us. He appears to be free in a way that at least I am not. I don't know about you. But the Buddha would say that that's just an illusion, because from his point of view, the distinction is illusory. From our point of view, we would say, well, it's a pretty damn persistent illusion, but nevertheless. So we could say that, simply put, that the very secret refuge, the ultimate refuge, is the attainment of Buddhahood, becoming the Buddha. So, so that's, this morning was about the refuge vow and the practice of taking refuge or going for refuge. And this afternoon, we'll begin with, we'll look at bodhicitta in the same way. Guru Rinpoche then turns to bodhicitta. And we'll look at that, and then when we get through with bodhicitta, then I guess we'll have questions and answers. As we did yesterday, let's this morning chant the short dedication on page 7. Sanam Deye Lam Jezemani Tone Nye Perana Amje Jengana Jehala Rumaye Simbe Thank you.